Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Deadly clashes erupt in Lebanon as Syrian unrest spills over. Bahrain and Saudi Arabia to form Arabian Gulf Union. And Somali draft constitution gives voice to women after decades of civil war. Mosaic. World news from the Middle East begins now.
Amid the raging tension, the return to the Abd al-Hamid Karami Square and the meeting at the home of Mohammed Kabara, the day in the Lebanese north, was filled with events.
For the second consecutive day, tension is running high in Tripoli following the arrest of Shadi al-Mawlawi. Al-Mawlawi's arrest sparked violent clashes in the Bab al-Tabaneh and Jabal Mohsen neighborhoods in Tripoli, where roads were cut off and traffic was halted. 5 people were injured in the fierce clashes that erupted Sunday night and continued into Monday morning, especially in the area of Mankoubin and Jabal Mohsen. Street battles and skirmishes spread to other regions, most notably Al-Bakar and Al-Malula. A rocket-propelled grenade was fired at an all-girls school in the area of Al-Zahriya. More than 50 people were injured and transported to city hospitals. It was very difficult for ambulances to reach some of the victims due to the intensity of fighting. For its part, the Lebanese army reinforced its presence in the areas overlooking Bab al-Tabaneh and Jabal Mohsen. However, the army was unable to put an end to the sporadic clashes that lasted throughout the day. One resident from the Al-Rashid tribe was killed in today's violence. Politically, a meeting was held at the home of Member of Parliament Mohammed Kabara. Among the participants were Ahmed Karami, who represented Prime Minister Najib Mikati, and Ahmed al-Safadi, who represented Minister al-Safadi, as well as other local legislators. MP Mouin al-Maribi walked out of the meeting and held the army responsible for the security breach due to its slow response.
Unfortunately, the army has not yet been deployed. The army doesn't want to make a plan or accept our proposed plan. It doesn't want to mobilize without a political cover. Therefore, we hold the army fully responsible for this breach.
It's a political conspiracy being hatched against the city of Tripoli. The High Defense Council, which convened under the auspices of the President of the Republic, is conspiring against the city of Tripoli. I demand the political authority, led by the Prime Minister, to either take responsible action or step down.
The political mobilization launched during the early afternoon hours has failed to secure the release of al-Mawlawi. This prompted members of the Islamist movement to return to the square and cut off the roads.
If they want justice, then they must treat everyone equally and without prejudice or favoritism. They also need to find an immediate solution to this problem.
They made a mistake by arresting him. His arrest was illegal and illegitimate. They must take responsible action and release him. Otherwise, the situation will escalate.
The situation in Tripoli is back to square one after all options were exhausted, which sparked a new wave of violence in a city best known as the capital of the north. From the city of Tripoli, Ramzi Al-Qadi, New TV.
Leaders
of the Arab countries of the Persian Gulf are meeting in the Saudi capital Riyadh to discuss incorporating Bahrain into Saudi Arabia. This comes a day after the preparatory ministerial meeting, where the Bahraini Prime Minister Khalifa bin Salman Al Khalifa said the current challenges have made the union imperative. Meanwhile, the Bahraini opposition warned Al Manama's authorities of the repercussions of the union.
The summit of Arab countries of the Persian Gulf in Riyadh comes a day after the preparatory ministerial meeting. Its top priority is considered a dangerous model for the world. It discussed incorporating Bahrain into Saudi Arabia under the name Union, which was described as Bahrain sacrificing itself on the Saudi altar. This plan is not only facing objections from inside Bahrain, but also from member countries of the Gulf Cooperation Council. Bahraini Prime Minister Khalifa bin Salman Al Khalifa justified the plan by saying that exceptional challenges and conditions have made it imperative to form what he referred to as a unified security system to protect the GCC countries. This is considered to be Al Manama's new official call to Riyadh to repress and intervene in the revolution demanding change and democracy after Saudi Arabia's forces entered Bahrain. Disputes over the planned union dominated the summit, as revealed by Bahrain's Minister of Information, Samira Rajab. A majority of the member countries fear the increasing hegemony of what they referred to as the big brother, Saudi Arabia. As for the Bahraini opposition, Al Wifaq National Islamic Society warned the regime against its attempted union.
No authority, Al Khalifa or any other, has the right in any form, be it federal or individual, to form a union with anyone without the Bahraini people's approval. Your decision is void.
بدوره التيار العمل الإسلامي المعارض شجب فكرة الانضمام وقال أن اتحاد المنهزمين.
For its part, the opposition Islamic Action Society denounced the idea of the union and said the union of the weak will not stop the revolution of the steadfast. It indicated the peaceful protests have been ongoing for over a year, and the Saudi forces contributed to crushing them. The society described the ominous union as a stillborn and doomed to fail, asserting that it lacks legitimacy as it does not abide by the people's will and legitimizes the Saudi occupation of Bahrain. In turn, political observers considered the so-called union a political move and an attempt to dilute the Bahraini identity under an expansive Saudi entity. This in turn would break the democratic movement in Bahrain, which does not benefit Al Manama's authorities or the ruling family in Saudi Arabia. Others said the union would be similar to Saddam Hussein's occupation of Kuwait, and they fear that its outcome would be brutal for everyone. Some other observers believe it's become a trend, using foreign forces to settle internal issues and repressing the people. The plan came as a shock to many that Al Manama's authorities would offer the sovereignty of their country on a platter to others, while not offering even the minimal concessions to their own people or meeting their legitimate demands.
In Bahrain, people have taken out to the streets outside the capital, Manama. They burned the US flag as they protested its support for the ongoing crackdown. The protesters have staged several anti-US demonstrations across the country. They consider Washington responsible for the crimes committed against them by the Bahraini regime. The US has recently welcomed the Bahraini Crown Prince to Washington and called Manama one of its allies in the Persian Gulf. Washington also announced several days ago that it's increasing its weapons sales to the Manama regime. The Saudi-backed regime has intensified its crackdown on protesters, calling for its downfall. Somalia is struggling to recover from a decades-long civil war. Somali women have borne the brunt of the crisis. Now, with the approval of a new constitution, their voice will be heard in the new Somali government. Abdulaziz Bilo Ali reports from Mogadishu.
2-decade civil war in Somalia has made the Horn of Africa nation to be among the few countries in the world generating the highest number of internally displaced persons and refugees, with the worst affected being women and children. Women in Somalia have been subjected to violence, harassment and discrimination at every level. Many are forced to give birth in appalling conditions with little or no antenatal or postnatal care. As a result, Somali women are among the most high-risk groups in terms of maternal health care in the world.
The war paralyzed the family unit set up in Somalia. Women fled with the children and some were left behind. The children were forced to stop schooling and were separated from their parents. Despite all these challenges, the Somali women have stood up. Despite the challenges, they've brought up their kids properly.
If the current draft constitution is ratified in Somalia, women's voice will be heard in the political process for the first time in almost 2 decades.
We, as the women of Somalia, are here to show our solidarity with this beautiful country of ours.
Women in Somalia have ventured in all fields despite the challenges and are even serving in the security forces in a country fighting the Al-Shabaab that has been waging a 5-year war against the country's weak and battled transitional federal government. Now the Somali women will have at least 30% of the seats in the new Constituent Assembly and will be a part of the permanent Somali government set to take office at the end of August. However, Somali women still contribute to the largest percentage of camp dwellers in Mogadishu and the neighboring states like Kenya.
The world is marking Mother's Day, but as for the Somali women, they continue to bear the brunt of the civil war. Many of the women have fled their regions and are residing in camps as internally displaced persons. It is so unfortunate, but we hope this changes soon.
In Mogadishu, committees of women are leading NGOs and other groups towards reconciliation. They have organized committees for improved health and educational services, some of which have been collaborating with the United Nations and international organizations. And despite the endless combat in Somalia, the Somali women's persistent efforts, complemented by other domestic and external pressure, have helped bring about the present situation being experienced in Mogadishu and Somalia at large. Abdulaziz Bilal, Press TV, Mogadishu.
In Syria, the Syria Revolution's General Commission said 16 people were killed today by the gunfire of Assad's brigades in various areas, including a first lieutenant and 2 civilians who died under torture in Homs.
After Assad's brigades intentionally targeted civilians in various neighborhoods and areas of Homs, the Free Syrian Army attacked the military and security centers in Rastan with machine guns and rockets. The Syrian security forces suffered large human and material losses. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said at least 23 regime soldiers were killed and dozens were wounded. It noted that 3 armored troop carriers were destroyed. 2 of them were seized, and the soldiers of the Assad brigades were imprisoned. In light of these developments, Assad's brigades launched retaliatory attacks using artilleries, killing and injuring dozens of civilians and destroying houses with their occupants inside. In Aleppo, the event is ongoing on the city's university campus. Hundreds of students demonstrated demanding the release of their schoolmates who were detained by security forces on charges of participating in anti-Assad protests. However, the Shabiha soon attacked the student protesters and assaulted them using batons and tear gas. Meanwhile, a number of international observers arrived in villages in the countryside of Aleppo and saw the tanks of Assad's brigade still deployed on the roads. In Hama, Assad's brigades and the Shabiha stormed a number of villages in the countryside and carried out wide-scale arrest campaigns against the civilians amid heavy and arbitrary gunfire terrorizing the residents. As the UN observers delegation arrived in Hama, hundreds of citizens waiting for them chanted slogans demanding freedom. In Idlib, in the northern parts of the country, a number of residents were killed and injured by the regime's violent killing machine. There was also a massive crowd greeting the international observers. Clashes were reported between Assad's brigades and defectors from the regime army in Al-Quriya of Deir ez-Zor province. Meantime, Assad's brigades were deployed in neighborhoods of the capital Damascus, and their forces pounded several villages in the countryside of the capital. leading to deaths. The heated developments on the ground did not prevent the demonstrators from taking to the streets of the Syrian cities and towns as usual, chanting anti-Assad slogans.
والرد الإسرائيلي حول عملية السلام المتعثرة لم يحمل ما يرضي الفلسطينيين.
Israel's response to the current impasse in the peace process did not satisfy the Palestinians. It contained no clear answers to the basic issues in dispute which are hindering the resumption of negotiations. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's message, reviewed by the Executive Committee of the Palestine Liberation Organization, stated Israel's point of view on returning to negotiations without preconditions. Our correspondent Shahrukh Assad reports from Ramallah.
Israel's response did not come with anything new, nor did it contain any answer to the essential issues that are hampering the resumption of peace talks. The most notable of these issues is ending the construction of settlements, acknowledging the borders of June 4, 1967, and releasing the political prisoners. This response follows Israel's response to Mahmoud Abbas's original message.
The Executive Committee believes that the Israeli message does not contain any clear answers in regards to the essential issues which are hindering the resumption of the peace process. Ending settlement construction tops our list.
In reality, the Israeli response did not exceed the Palestinians' expectations and came as a reaffirmation of its settlement policy on the ground in the West Bank and Jerusalem. It was a response similar to Israel's stance during the exploratory talks in the Jordanian capital around 2 months ago. Israel demanding negotiations without any preconditions, focusing on the security deployments, specifically in the Jordan Valley. This new response with the same old content does not create any groundwork for resuming the talks.
This matter will prevent the opening of a political path in the region. Benjamin Netanyahu's right-wing government is responsible for it, especially after the coalition it created with the Kadima party led by Mufaz. With this, the right-wing extremists in this government will be dealing with the Palestinian people.
The prisoners' hunger strike was another issue discussed at the meeting of the Executive Committee, which held Israel responsible for the prisoners' lives. Abbas said there are Arab and international efforts, specifically from Egypt, to resolve this humanitarian crisis.
We have stated more than once that some of their lives are at risk. If that happens, it will be a national catastrophe.
So the Palestinian leadership is still waiting for urgent international intervention in the prisoners' issue and to save the peace process. The Palestinian leadership fears for the upcoming phase in light of Israel's expanded right-wing government. Meanwhile, many Palestinians on the ground demand the restructuring of internal fronts in Palestine and urge the international community to intervene again. They also demand that the Palestinian Authority end its security and economic obligations to Israel. Shahrukh Assad, Dubai TV, Ramallah.
وسياسة الهدم الإسرائيلية طالت العشرات من منازل الفلسطينيين.
Meanwhile, as part of Israel's policy of demolition, hundreds of Palestinian houses and organizations were razed in 2011. According to a report by non-governmental organizations with the cooperation of the United Nations, Israel demolished 620 buildings in the West Bank, including 62 that were built with funds from the European Union. The report added that 110 other buildings were listed to be demolished in the future.
We open on the diplomatic front, where the Palestinians have received the Israeli response on the renewal of the peace process. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu started off the cabinet meeting by introducing his new Vice Premier, Shaul Mofaz, and restating the goals of their unity government. We get more in this report by Aaron Viner.
The Prime Minister today outlined his plans to advance the four main goals of the new national unity government. After welcoming Kadima head Shaul Mufaz, Netanyahu said that multi-party teams will be created to form an alternative to the tall law that exempts ultra-Orthodox Jewish men from compulsory military service by the end of July. And he also vowed to implement change to the electoral system by the end of this year. Finance Minister Yuval Steinitz expressed hope that the coalition will be able to pass the biannual budget. Last night's delivery of the Prime Minister's letter to Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas was also discussed. Special Envoy Yitzhak Molcho presented Israel's response to Palestinian demands to renew the peace negotiations. Several ministers expressed skepticism.
It really doesn't matter if it was the old or the new government. What matters is the Palestinians themselves. We haven't had negotiations with them just because they refused to really negotiate directly. As soon as they will, with whatever government Israel will have, there will be negotiations for peace.
Netanyahu's position is that the Palestinians should renew negotiations without preconditions, acknowledge Israel's security needs, and recognize it as the nation-state of the Jewish people.
Prime Minister Netanyahu's special peace envoy met with the Palestinian President Abbas. He handed him a special letter from my Prime Minister. We hope honestly that this exchange of letters between the two sides can help push the peace process forward.
Following delivery of the letter, the diplomatic ball has now been thrown back into the Palestinians' court.
Today, the Executive Committee of the PLO will convene a meeting. This meeting will be followed by a meeting with the Fatah Central Committee to discuss the letter and the whole Israeli-Palestinian relations and the futuristic steps on the basis of what will be discussed and decided by the leadership.
Talks between the two sides were to be resumed last month when a Palestinian delegation came to the Prime Minister's residence in Jerusalem and delivered a letter from PA President Mahmoud Abbas demanding a halt to settlement construction in the West Bank and condemning what he called Israel's lack of commitment to the peace process. Palestinian Prime Minister Salam Fayyad chose not to attend that meeting, which would have been the highest-level talk since 2010, when Netanyahu rejected similar Palestinian demands to implement a freeze on building in the West Bank. A senior official in the Prime Minister's office told IBA News that the cabinet today chose not to support proposed legislation from Likud MK Miri Regev that would empower the Knesset to be the only body to impose restrictions on settlement building and, more importantly, extend Israeli sovereignty to all Jewish outposts in the West Bank, including homes in the disputed Ulpana neighborhood, ordered by the Supreme Court to be demolished by July 1st. Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman is already on record demanding that the government introduce legislation to circumvent the High Court ruling. Attorney General Yuda Weinstein has, however, condemned any attempt to retroactively approve illegally constructed outposts and cautioned against Knesset interference with High Court rulings. This is Erin Viner for IBA News.
A pro-settlers group today petitioned the High Court on behalf of residents of the Ulpana neighborhood, whose homes are slated for demolition by July 1st. The petition by the Legal Forum for the Land of Israel names those in violation of the law as the Prime Minister, the Defense Minister, the State Prosecutor's Office, and the High Court itself. The petition states that the court should not have ruled in favor of demolishing the buildings until it had heard the claims of the apartment buyers or the residents of the Ulpana neighborhood, which are attached as parties to the petition. The forum is requesting an interim order to freeze the evacuation of the neighborhood until a final decision on its appeal is reached.
A new Algerian satellite channel was launched in London. The channel hosted several Algerian opposition figures living in exile. The sharp criticism by the guests of Al-Magharibiya of the government in Algeria raised questions about the motive of the channel and its owners. One of the funders is directly linked to the Algerian Islamic movement. More details in the following report.
The
launch of Al-Magharibiya channel in the British capital, London, nearly 4 months ago, coincided with the announcement of the Algerian Authority holding legislative elections on May 10th. Since then, Al-Maghribiya dedicated its entire coverage to the events in Algeria. The channel opened its doors to Algerian opposition leaders who didn't hesitate to sharply criticize the Algerian army and regime, prompting many Algerians to consider the channel as opposition-based media.
Some people will watch the channel because of the status quo in Algeria, where the media is not free.
العديد من الجزائريين المقيمين في بريطانيا تابعوا انطلاقة المغاربية. الكثير منهم يعيبون.
Many Algerians living in Britain who watched the launch of Al-Maghribiya accused the channel of exaggerating its rhetoric against the authority by focusing only on the negative issues.
Every channel has two sides, positive and negative. However, this channel has a negative side only.
It's worth mentioning that Britain is hosting a large number of Algerians who fled the country during the terror attacks launched in the 1990s.
والله القناة يعني تبين افتتاح أكثر وتوسيع في البرامج حول مواضيع عديدة.
The channel is more open, and its programs cover many issues, especially political, social, and current events in Algeria.
القنوات التلفزيونية الجزائرية الأرضية منها والفضائية.
All Algerian television channels, including satellite stations, are funded by the government.
إلى قنوات تقدم الرأي الآخر وتحاسب المسؤولين. ومن شأن مشروع قانون.
This has led the Algerian people to seek channels that offer the other side of the story and hold officials responsible.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Wincoat Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic. Airwaves, a global channel of uncompromising stories, world news, documentaries, entertainment, and culture. Link TV, connecting you to the world. For more information, visit linktv.org.